Stuka Joe here. We're about to begin 1806, and upon reviewing the video for 1805, I noticed that I involuntarily left out some video clips showing additional consequences of the defeat of Austria. So what I will be doing now, I will be showing you all the consequences of the defeat of Austria. Then we will go into the victory phase where victory and escalade points are scored, and then we will start the 1806 turn. We now proceed to the conquest phase, and there are consequences that are enforced now as a result of the conquest of Austria. The defeat of Austria represents an extra card for France in the next turn, so we mark it accordingly. Another consequence of the conquest of Austria is that the continental blockade is now in effect on the ports of Venice, Trieste, and Zara, independently of the play of the continental blockade card. Now Austria loses 3 provinces that can be annexed to France or any of its minor allies. The first province is going to be the province of Venice, which is now annexed to the Kingdom of Italy. And together with Roman and Milan, now the Kingdom of Italy has expanded, and as a result of that, a second Italian corps is now available and placed in the French reserves. France also annexes the province of Tyrol, and by special rule now, the Kingdom of Bavaria is formed, and it is a minor ally of France. The creation of the Kingdom of Bavaria provides 1 additional card for the French. And the third and last zone to be annexed is the one surrounding Salzburg. So we place the national territory marker there. But note that because that zone is not connected to the national territory that leads all the way to Paris, no new units can be placed there. However, the reason for annexing Salzburg to the French is to be able to station French units there and keep a close eye on Austria the next time Austria comes into the war. And now the French forces can decide whether to stay in Austria or to leave Austria. If they decide to leave, they are moved to the closest frontier-friendly zone that has a fortress. So that would be actually the recently annexed Salzburg. And in this particular case, all French forces, that is Napoleon's army, as well as Davout's and Marmont's forces, are moved to Salzburg. Because they do not outrank Napoleon, no French unit leader does, they are form part of the Grande Armée. The Grande Armée has currently 3 subordinate leaders and 8 corps, of which 6 are reduced, for a total of 10 combat factors. The Russians, being on the losing side, cannot stay, so Kutuzov's army has to move to the closest friendly frontier zone that has a fort, and that is here in Brest-Litovsk. Demoralization markers are removed, and the defeated forces of the home country can be deployed in any key zone with a star here, and Charles's force will be moved to Vienna. Now we determine how many years Austria will be in a forced peace status. We roll 1 die, divided by 2, and round the result up. And because of the importance of this die roll, we're going to film it live. So here we go. It's 2 divided, and 2 is 1. So it's only 1 year that Austria will be in forced peace. So that means it's going to be 1806. And the forced peace status will be lifted starting in 1807. Now we adjust the victory and escalade points. Because Austria was conquered, there is 1 victory point added for France and it goes to 6, and the escalade level also goes up by 1 level. And that is the end of the 1805 turn, and now we move to the year 1806. So we begin the 1806 turn and we are in the interphase. And the first subphase of the interphase is the declaration of war phase. And the coalition has to decide and announce if it will declare war on any neutral, major, or minor power. And after reviewing the situation, the coalition obviously does not want to declare war on Prussia. Austria just became neutral because of a forced peace as a result of their defeat. So the coalition will not declare war on any major or minor power. So now France has to decide whether to declare war or not. The situation is not as clear-cut for the French. Austria has been knocked out of the war. They will be, this turn, out. They may be back fighting against France in 1807. So this gives Napoleon 1 full year to conquer Prussia. And why conquer Prussia? Because Prussia controls Hesse. Hesse has this R here. It means that Hesse is one of those minor powers that comprises the Confederation of the Rhine, a French protectorate that comes to birth if the French control all minors that have this R. Currently, the French control these minors. They would have to conquer Thuringe and Hesse, and therefore, by doing that, the Confederation of the Rhine is created and they gain a victory point. The Army of the Elbe is very weak for combat factors, but during the budget phase, the coalition, if war is declared on Prussia, can add units to that army. And here we see Kutuzov's army, which is in a weakened state also. It has 2 of its 3 corps at half strength for a total strength of 4 combat factors. So the French finally decide to declare war on Prussia. Here we see the situation with the card assignment table as it was at the beginning of the 1805 turn. We saw during 1805 that France conquered the Tyrol and annexed it to the newly formed Kingdom of Bavaria. And that gives France 1 additional card. In addition, France defeated and knocked Austria out of the war, also earning an additional card, and the coalition, because of the defeat of Austria, lost the cards for Vienna and also Prague. However, with the French declaration of war against Prussia, now the coalition earns a card for Berlin and Königsberg, and also a card for Warsaw. And the final tally is that for 1806, France will receive 8 cards and the coalition 9. Now we go to the card hand phase, where each player can discard into the discard pile some or all of their cards. The coalition has this harem card, which ends a foreign war but has an activation value of 3, and this combat card, so the coalition decides not to discard any cards. The French only have this card, Marie Walewska, and it has an activation value of 3, and the event creates Poland, so they will not discard this card. The coalition will have an 8-card hand. They have 2 cards from their prior turn, and we add 2 more cards, which are the permanent cards for Great Britain and Russia. So they, having 4 cards, they will draw 4 additional cards from the draw pile. With 2 cards in their hand, the French draw 6 additional cards from the draw pile. Among the new cards, we see a foreign war card that compromises the British. We have 2 combat cards, a very important major campaign card, a mutiny card that prevents coalition fleets from being activated, and this interesting card, the Jean-Baptiste Eblé card, which provides a bonus of +2 besieging a citadel, or it allows the crossing of a river without bridges, or the crossing of a strait in the presence of enemy fleets at sea, except, of course, in the English Channel. The coalition with 4 cards draws 5 additional cards for their 9-card hand. Here we see the coalition player's hand, 9 cards. Let's take a look at the new cards. Drums of War raises the escalade level by 1, and it allows a defeated major power of the coalition to stay in the game. The Walcheren card allows 2 fleets, 2 corps, and a depot to make a coastal attack on a zone bordering with Britain. That means the northern coast of France. The city, this adds 2 cards to the coalition during the next turn, and cards are very important in this game because the more cards a side has, the more actions it can undertake, not only during the activations phase, but also during the budget phase and during the diplomatic phase. We have a combat card and the Spanish galleons card, which forces the side controlling Spain, right now it is France, to discard randomly a card, or Spain produces nothing in the next budget phase. Now we go to the budget phase, where the sides purchase new units and spend resources to do so. And here we have the resource table, which lists the number of resources that each of the major powers have. France 14, Britain 6, and either 1 free fleet or a card per turn. Russia and Austria each have 12 resources. Prussia starts the game with 5, but if the event Holy Empire card is played, that increases to 8. Spain starts the game with 4, but during the War of Liberation, that increases to 6, but Spain then cannot purchase any fleets. And the Ottoman Empire, that is Turkey, receives 4 resource points. It is important to note that each key zone in a major power, the loss of key zone represents a penalty of 4 resource points. Now, resources are used to purchase new units, and here we have the cost to do so in the production table. And for example, the cost to produce 1 step of a regular corps is 1 resource point. If it is a step of militia, National Guard, or Landwehr Corps, it is 0.75 resource points. And if, for example, it is a step of an elite unit, it is half a resource per star. So if it is a 1-star elite unit, it would cost 1.5 resource points. And here we have the costs for the other items in the production table. During the budget phase, the order in which units are produced is as follows. First, the Ottoman Empire, then Spain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Britain, and then France. So we begin with Turkey. Turkey only receives 4 resources. So they will purchase 2 units, 2 regular corps units. Each cost 2 resources. So they will purchase the 2nd Corps and the 1st Corps, and they can place any of the leaders also on the map, and they will select the Grand Vizier. And the new units can be placed in the major power's capital or any fortress in their national territory that is not besieged. So they will place the new units to keep Russia off guard here in the fortress of Ismail. That is a border zone here with Odessa. Now we go to the Spanish production, and the Spanish only have one corps to bring into the game, the second corps at full strength, and that would cost 2 resources, so we will place that corps in the map. We will leave the leaders in the reserve for now. Let's take a look at the situation in Spain. The Spanish have 3 separate forces in their home country. We have La Romanas' force, 1 full-strength corps in Cartagena, Castaños' force, 1 full-strength corps in the capital, Madrid, and we have Blake's force, which is 1 half-strength corps and a mobile supply unit in La Coruña. We see that the Portuguese are allied to the coalition, actually to the British, so the Portuguese pose a threat here to Blake's force. So the newly constructed or built 4th Corps will be placed here in La Romana to reinforce Blake's force. Now it's Prussia's turn to purchase units with resources. Prussia has 5 resources. And this elite corps, because each step of a 1-star elite corps cost 1.5 resources, 2 cost 3 resources. So we spend 3 to pick the 1st corps, and the remaining 2 resources will be used to purchase the 7th corps. The new units for Prussia can be placed either here in Berlin, the Prussian capital, or in any zone in its national territory that has a fortress. The Army of the Elbe is currently here at Magdeburg, so both new units will be placed with the main Prussian army. We place the new units here in the holding box of the Army of the Elbe, and now this army has a total of 8 combat factors. Now it's Austria's turn. Austria is in a forced peace status as a result of being defeated by France. So the game rules specify that in those instances, the coalition decides what to produce. Austria has 12 resource points, and they will spend 2 to create an army. So they have 10, and 4 to build this full-strength reserve cavalry. So now they have 6 left, and they will use those 6 to purchase 3 regular infantry corps. And the army will be created here in Vienna, where Charles's force is, and Charles will be the commander of the army. And because he's now commanding an army, his command rating is doubled. He can command up to 14 strength points. So let's take a look at Charles's army. His army has 7 units. 3 of them are at half strength. But with the new units that have been added, now Charles's army has 11 combat factors and 1 mobile supply unit. In addition, we can place generals with the newly entering forces. So we will select John and also Bellegarde. And they will be placed with Charles' army, so they are the subordinate generals in that army. With such a quick buildup of Austrian forces in Vienna, the French have to be very careful in sending Napoleon north, so they will probably task Massena's army to approach the Austrians, just to keep an eye on that Austrian army. Now it's Russia's turn, and they have 12 resources. They spend 4 to build the reserve cavalry. They have 8 left. They will spend half a point for each of the mobile supply units, so that will be 1 point. And now they have 7 points left. They will purchase 2 infantry corps at 2 points each, so they have 3 resources left. We use the 3 remaining points to flip to their full strength the elite 1st and 2nd corps. And now we place the newly constructed units, and now we can see that the Russian army is a force to contend with. 6 corps totaling 12 combat factors, plus 2 mobile supply units. The question is whether Kutuzov here in Brest-Litovsk will make it on time to Magdeburg before Napoleon moves north and crushes the main Prussian army. Now it's Britain's turn, and they receive 6 resources, and they also can pick a free fleet or an additional card for this turn. The 6 resources will be spent, 5 to purchase this fleet, and the remaining resource can purchase 2 mobile supply units. Now we will pick the card, and it is very important for the coalition because the coalition's hand for this turn is not very impressive. There's a very powerful card there, the War of Liberation, which practically brings Spain into the war against France. So the coalition draws an additional card, and that is the Weather Gauge. And this card gives a bonus of +3 in the first round of naval combat. So we add that to the coalition's hand. The new fleet is placed here in the port of London, and the 2 mobile supply units are placed here with Moore's force, which is also in the British capital. Now it's the Empire's turn, and the Empire receives 14 resources. Let's start by spending resources to flip units to full strength in each of France's armies. In the Grande Armée, we can only flip back to full strength 2 reduced French units. We will flip the Imperial Guard, which is a double elite unit, and by flipping it to full strength, we use 2 resources. It's 1 for the unit and half for each star. So now we have 12 resources left, and we will flip to full strength the elite First Corps. So that'll be 1.5. And right now we have 10.5 resources left, and we cannot flip any more French units to their full strength side in that army. In the Army of Italy, there is 1 reduced French unit, so we will flip it to its full strength side, and that costs 1 resource point. So now we have 9.5 resource points left. We spend 3 to pick up the elite 5th Corps. We have 6.5 left. We spend 4 to pick up these 2 regular infantry corps. So now we have 2.5 left. We pick up the regular 17th Corps, and we have half a resource left. And with that, we can pick 1 mobile supply unit. And we can choose the 2 generals, Oudinot and Bernadotte, who, if you take a close look at them, they're not anything to write home about, but we'll need them to command some of these forces. The French will place Oudinot and 2 regular French corps here at Bayonne. That is near the Spanish border. A word of caution about Spain. At the beginning of the game, Spain begins technically allied to France, but French units cannot enter Spain until the French player plays this card, Snare of Bayonne. This increases the escalade level by 1 and gives the French 2 victory points. And as you can see, it allows French units to enter Spain, and the French receive General Joseph and 2 additional corps. Now, this card cannot be discarded by the French, and once played, it allows the coalition player to play the Dos de Mayo card. And this is the card that ignites the Spanish rebellion against the French. Spain joins the coalition, and the War of Liberation begins. And Spain also receives 4 militia corps, and it can then play the guerrilla card for its event. Now, none of the sides at this time in the game have any of these cards in their hands. So we're going to return these cards to their respective draw piles and then shuffle both draw piles. And the French will place Bernadotte, an elite corps, a regular corps, and a mobile supply unit here in Liège. And they will be tasked with advancing in this direction and take Hesse. That will free up Napoleon to move north and deal exclusively with the main Prussian army. Now each of the sides brings units of their allied miners, and the way this works is that each side totals the number of miners that it controls, and you divide it by 2 and you round it down. In the case of France, France controls miners of Holland, Italy, Bavaria, and Württemberg. That is 4 miners, so they can pick 2 steps of miners. They will pick this unit, this Italian unit, which consists of 1 step, and they will bring in this Dutch corps in its reduced state. The Italian unit can be placed in any of these zones, Venice, Roman, and Milan, where Massena's army happens to be, so it will be placed with Massena's army. And now Massena's army has 7 combat factors. And the reduced Dutch corps goes here in Holland. Now we proceed to one of the most interesting parts of the game, the diplomatic phase. And a lot can happen in the diplomatic phase. First, the coalition declares what he's going to do, what they're going to do in the diplomatic phase, and then France. And during the diplomatic phase, each player can take what it's called diplomatic actions on minor or major neutral powers. And that is for the purpose of bringing these minor or major powers to one side. And to do that, you have to pay the cost in activation points. If it's a major power, you have to play an activation 3 card. If it's a minor power with combat units, it's an activation 2 card. And if it's a minor without any combat units, it's 1 activation point card. And then you have to roll, and you got to get a modified die roll of 6. But there are modifiers that apply, which are listed on the diplomatic table. For example, here you see that suppose Austria is going to be rolled for. If the coalition's trying to bring Austria on their side, they would get a +2. And you see here, for example, if Denmark was being rolled for and France wants to bring Denmark to its side, it would get a +1, but the coalition wouldn't get any modifiers. For Egypt, both sides get a +1. Most of the modifiers are in favor of the coalition, as you can see, but many of the minor neutrals have no modifiers at all. Here you see Prussia and Russia have a +2 for the coalition. And Turkey is interesting. There's a +1 for France if France is trying to recruit Turkey. A -1 if Egypt was attacked by the player attempting the diplomatic action. But in this case, Egypt has not been attacked. So if France wants to bring Turkey into the war, it will receive a +1 die roll modifier. That means that if it rolls a 5 or a 6, Turkey is an ally of France. So that's a 33% chance right there. In the deck of cards, there are also events that may modify a diplomatic die roll. In addition, the French can use cards to create protectorates on any of its allied minor powers. A protectorate is a special status that is given to French allied minor powers. Protectorate means that the minor cannot be influenced or cannot be changed to the coalition's side through a diplomatic action. So the protectorate status makes it immune to diplomatic die rolls or diplomatic actions by the coalition. Now, also, the coalition player can play an event card to stop a foreign war. And events can be also played during this time, different events. Now, the coalition goes first, and the coalition announces that it will not undertake any diplomatic action. So the coalition has a lot of cards. In this turn, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 10 is the maximum amount of cards. So the coalition has a lot of cards in its hand and will not use any during the diplomatic phase. So now it is France's turn. France intends to try to dispatch the main Prussian army before the Russians can arrive in force. Now there's a very interesting situation that may develop here. France has this card, the Marie Walewska card, which creates the protectorate of Poland. But it's created only after Warsaw is controlled by the French, and the French don't control Warsaw. And Warsaw is right here in the path of the Russian army as it is coming to the aid of the Prussians. So Napoleon not only wants to knock out Prussia during this year's campaign, but also wants to seize Warsaw so that the duchy or protectorate of Warsaw is created. This protectorate, if one additional zone bearing the Polish symbol is then annexed to the duchy of Warsaw, then a second Polish unit will come into the game. With the formation of Poland, one unit and one leader enter the game, but with the annexation of one of these two provinces, a second Polish unit comes in the game, and the Polish units are actually pretty good. Now, Napoleon has here a chance to bring an ally, a major power, into the war. And that major power is the Ottoman Turks. And you can see here that Turkey controls a vast extension of territory that borders with Russia. And they already have a force here with 2 infantry corps in the frontier facing this lone Russian corps at Odessa. So the French may take a shot at trying to bring, through diplomatic action, the Turks into the war. And to do that, they have to burn a 3-point card. They don't want to use Marie Walewska, neither the French permanent card. And they will use this card, Mutiny, for that purpose. And it will return because it is not being used for its event. So France declares that it will attempt to bring the Ottomans into the war, and they pay with this card. And the card goes to the French discard pile. Because of the importance of this die roll, we're going to roll the die live, and we're going to use this clear glass in lieu of a dice tower. And I recently saw a gamer film a video where he rolls dice into a clear glass. It was the Hunters. I don't recall his name, but man, if I would have known that, I wouldn't have purchased my dice tower. Very, very effective method. Now we're going to roll one die. There's a +1 modifier, and the target die roll, modified die roll, is a 6 or more. So there's a +1 because of the diplomatic table that Turkey tends to be a little friendly to the French. So we need a 5 or a 6 for the Ottomans to enter on the French side. Any other result is a failure. So we roll one die, and the result is a 4 modified to a 5. So they are short by 1, and Turkey remains neutral. We now proceed with the neutral major power movement phase, where the players move the forces of neutral major powers, but cannot make any force marches. The neutral major powers right now are Austria and Turkey, but Turkey goes first. While neutral, France controls the movement of the forces of Turkey, and they can move their base movement factor. For example, this force commanded by, let's see, what's his name here? Pachlivan Khan has a movement allowance of 3, and it can move 3 zones and end movement here with the forces of the Grand Vizier. And now, because of the stacking rules, only one force can be present there. We see that the Grand Vizier outranks Khan here. So Khan will be removed and placed in the reserves, but the corps he is commanding now forms part of the Vizier's force. And we place Khan here in the reserves, and he may return to the game later. Now we proceed to the strategic redeployment phase, and this represents the movement of troops off-season, that is, during the non-combat season. So the interesting effect of this mechanic is that you can move a substantial number of troops now during the strategic redeployment phase, and then you're going to have a completely different situation when we begin the action rounds for 1807. So I think it's a very elegant way of avoiding extra turns and extra phases of movement that's not going to lead to combat. So let's take a look at the situation now in the strategic redeployment phase. During this phase, only supplied forces of each side can move, except neutral powers that cannot. So Austria and Turkey cannot move any of its units now. And units may be moved if accompanied by leaders up to double their movement factor. But an attrition die roll has to be made if they exceed their printed movement factor. Units without any leaders can move up to their printed movement factors, and they cannot, in any event, they cannot enter zones containing enemy units or besieged enemy fortresses or containing an enemy control marker, and they cannot move into a zone in which they would be unsupplied. The phase is conducted in the same order as we have stated before for other matters, beginning with Turkey, but Turkey, because it is neutral, does not perform any strategic redeployment. Next is Spain. This is the situation in Spain. There are 3 weak Spanish forces. We have Blake's with 3 combat factors here in La Coruña, Castaños with 2 combat factors in the capital, Madrid, and La Romana with 2 combat factors in Cartagena. A very tempting target is the British citadel of Gibraltar. This has a siege value of 2, and that means that to lay siege on this citadel, the enemy would have to occupy it with double the siege value in combat factors, that is 4 combat factors. And none of these forces have on their own 4 combat factors. So it is conceivable that in the strategic redeployment phase, they would both march and meet somewhere in the vicinity of Gibraltar, so that during the upcoming activation phase, a force of 4 combat factors can be activated and lay siege on Gibraltar. Meanwhile, Blake's force, 3 combat factors, could conceivably move through strategic redeployment into Portugal, but only up to this zone. It cannot advance through strategic redeployment into this one because it has an unconquered or enemy fortress there. Meanwhile, the French here in Bayonne cannot even enter Spain. To do that, they would have to play the Snare of Bayonne event. And if you remember the French hand a while ago, they don't have that card. So Blake's force will move through strategic redeployment 1 movement factor into the zone of Porto. They will stop there. They will not advance any further. They only spent 1 movement factor, so they don't have to roll for attrition. Remember, attrition in Spain is deadly because there's a +2 die roll modifier for entering a poor zone, which is a zone in this bone white color. And now Castaños and La Romana will not attempt to join for now. Castaños will move in this direction to this zone, spending 3 movement points, and that way Castaños is threatening Portugal directly from the east. So Portugal now has to contend with him and Blake's force further to the north. Next, Prussia performs strategic redeployment. The Prussians expect Napoleon to attack Brunswick's army here at Magdeburg if Brunswick stays there. So the Prussians will move the main army to Berlin. Hohenloh's force will move 3 zones into Berlin also, and his force will be absorbed by the main Prussian army. And as we see here, the main Prussian army now has 2 subordinate leaders and 10 combat factors. The half-strength 5th Corps in Warsaw will stay put for now. Now it would be Austria's turn, but Austria's neutral, so they don't move through strategic redeployment. And next up is Russia. Kutuzov needs to join with the Prussians as soon as possible. He will force march the maximum, that is 3 movement points for a total of 6. He could take this route, trying to avoid the swamp, but with 6 movement points he'll end here. So he'll have to cross the river, move into the swamp, move here into West Prussia, and finally to Kustrin by spending 6 movement points. This march will add modifiers in the attrition die roll for the swamp as well as for crossing a poor zone. The Russian army has 12 combat factors, so they're going to roll on this column, and you can see the prospects are not very encouraging. The die roll modifiers are as follows. They moved across a marsh, so that is a +1. Also, they crossed a poor zone, so that is a +2, so we're at +3. But Russians have a -1 when the force marching is made by a force composed exclusively by Russians, so that is a +2 on the 12 to 14 column. So we roll 1d6, and the result is a 4 + 2, 6. That is a loss of 2 strength factors. And the Russians will reduce to their half-strength side the non-elite 4th and 7th Corps. Benningsen's force will move 3 movement factors to reach Königsberg. Tormasov here in Kiev, not liking the Ottoman buildup on the frontier, will move 3 zones into Odessa and will absorb the militia that was stationed there. Next is the strategic redeployment phase for the British. As we can see here, all British land units are here in London, and there is no naval movement during the strategic redeployment phase, so the British will not move any units now. And now the French perform strategic redeployment. The French begin by moving Bernardot's corps. It will move through Flanders into Holland, where it will pick up the reduced Dutch corps, and it will spend its 4th movement point to enter the zone of Hanover. Hanover is a minor ally of France. Because it exceeded the movement allowance of the allied Dutch corps, which is 3, it has to roll for attrition. And I'll just place a die next to it as a reminder. Now Napoleon's Grande Armée will conduct a force march of 3 additional zones. As you can see, the Grande Armée is composed mostly of units with 4 movement factors, but there is this reduced Bavarian corps with a movement factor of 3, so the movement rate of the whole army is considered to be 3. Napoleon announces that he will force march 3 additional movement factors for a total of 6. And he moves to Ulm, from there to Baden, and then next to Berg. Having spent 3 movement factors, he uses the 4th to enter Wesel. With the 5th movement factor, he enters Hanover, and he uses the last movement factor to enter this zone in Hesse. And Hesse, that particular zone in Hesse, is eligible because it does not have an enemy fortress or nor an enemy control marker, and it is in supply. Napoleon can take supply from here, from Hanover, from there to Wesel, and then into Liège. Now Massena is here with the army of Italy. He will detach from the army Marshal Lannes and this Italian corps, and they will constitute a force, and Lannes' force will move 3 zones here to Tuscany, where St. Cyr's force is currently deployed. Because Lannes outranks St. Cyr will go to the reserve, and his forces, that is the 14th Corps and the Mobile Supply Unit, now forms part of Lannes' force, and the French want Lannes to advance south to take on Naples, which is an ally of the British. Meanwhile, Massena's army will be strategically redeployed from here, Milan, through Zurich, through Ulm, and finally into Munich, spending 4 movement factors. That means that his army will also have to roll for attrition because it contains 1 Italian corps with a movement factor of 3. We roll on the attrition table for Napoleon's forced march. He has 12 combat factors, and the only applicable modifier is this one, of a force of at least 50% of French steppes. And that applies because we have 1 reduced strength Bavarian unit. Otherwise, it would have been a force completely composed of French steppes, which would have given us a -2. So the die roll is a -1, and we roll 1d6. And the result is a 2, -1, 1. 1 step, and it has to be of French troops. So the French decide to reduce the 2nd Corps. We rolled for attrition of Bernardot's and Massenas's formations, and none suffered any casualties. So that is the end of the strategic redeployment phase. And this concludes the interphase of 1806. In the next video, we will continue with the activation phase for 1806, and the maneuvers and battles will commence. We will be showing you the actions of the sides in a more expedited manner, since we have already explained the main mechanics of both the interphase and the activation phase. So, will the coalition be able to successfully coordinate their actions? Will the Russians and Prussians be able to join and defeat Napoleon, or will he defeat them in detail before the gates of Berlin? Stay tuned and find out in Napoleon Against Europe. Thanks for watching.